Welcome to this episode of the Strong and Kind podcast. This episode is with Dr. Justin Gilfillan. Justin is the owner operator of the Special Forces Elite Initiative. He's a physical therapist. He's a buddy of mine. We talked about preparing for special operations. We talked about CrossFit. We talked about hunting. We had a really good conversation and we covered a lot of topics. It was pretty entertaining and a lot of fun. So check it out. Let me know what you think on YouTube or Spotify, and I appreciate you listening. Good smile. All right, let's jump in. So, Justin, tell me about what got you on the path to wanting to help people pursue like special operations and that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a question I get a lot. And I started my career as a physical therapist. Actually, let's take a step back. When I was going through high school, I always wanted to, and this is a classic story everyone talks about, but I always wanted to go into the military and always wanted to go specifically to be a pararescueman in the Air Force. And that dream got cut short the first two times I stepped into a recruiter's office or talked to a recruiter because of my asthma. I have pretty bad asthma. I had it since I was a kid. I was on like a machine as a kid to kind of really help my asthma. And I thought I grew out of it, but I was never able to pass a pulmonary function test. So I was never able to actually pursue my dreams there. And as I was going through PT school, I was always kind of looking at, oh, can I commission? Can I work in like the VA and all these different areas to give back to our military community? Because I have a lot of family members who are in it, and I'm passionate about serving them because they're serving us, right? The ultimate sacrifice. And none of it really stuck. None of it really felt good for me. So after I graduated PT school, I just took a job in a traditional outpatient physical therapy clinic, and this was in Delaware. And after working there for a couple of years, I started to get like a few airmen and some local, Army reservists come to me for physical therapy. And the airmen, it really posed some curiosity in my brain in terms of like, why are they coming to me? Like, why are they coming to me off base when I know they have physical therapists, they have rehab professionals on base? And that's just really just posed my curiosity, and I started doing a bunch of research, asking a bunch of questions, and I really found out that there's a huge gap in, especially with the military community, between like the rehab side of things and their physical training. And I first wanted to fill that gap, and that was what I launched my business in doing, more geared towards just general service members. And as time went by, who knows why, universe just kept sending these guys my way who were injured, beat up, and there was a common theme between all of them, and they were preparing to go into special operations. That's when I did more research, found out there was even a bigger gap with this community, and I had fun with them, right? I built good relationships, the kind of people I like to be around and talk to, and I just made it my mission to fill that gap.
Yeah. No, I think like your story. So, I mean, you actually, I went to the recruiter a couple times. Like, honestly, what kept me was just fear, like a fear, wanting to have it all planned out, like, and thinking, like, I was such a fear motivated or fear driven individual, probably prior to the last few years, that, like, I just couldn't make the jump because I was afraid that if I made the jump and then I didn't get to actually where my goal would be, like it would be so miserable that I couldn't handle it. And now I trust myself a lot more. But yeah, it brings up an interesting point because I think the military is kind of this from I have a few people who are in the military on my roster, actually one who just got out. Um and that transition out of the military is like really hard. And we can kind of talk about that a little bit, but like talk about some of the tricky things that you didn't really understand or didn't know, like that being in the military like maybe constrains people's ability to like get the help that they need, or it makes them think a certain way that's kind of not beneficial.
Yeah, I think the one biggest thing that I learned very quickly is that most people's perception of the military is pretty false when it comes to their roles and responsibilities for the most part in conventional military. So I got a lot of guys in my roster who are active duty military wanting to go into special operations. And a lot of them are working like desk jobs, which we don't think about when we think about military, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of desk jobs, like a lot of desk jobs across, the span of different responsibilities and roles within the military. And, with that comes equal amount of support with the medical system. If someone gets injured and they're working a desk job, guess what? All the physical therapists, rehab professionals, for the most part, I'm not saying all of them. Like I have a good buddy who's a physical therapist in the Air Force, and totally different story. But this is just stories that I hear most often are, oh, they got me to a point where I can sit on my desk all day and stand up from a chair, but not to the point where I can PR my mile and a half, that I can squat 2 times my body weight and, really get to a high level performance that a lot of my people want to get to. So I think the biggest thing is like, it's kind of the same as our healthcare system, right? Our insurance-based healthcare system here in the civilian side of things, where it's like you're only going to get to a certain point until they have to discharge you because insurance isn't going to cover anymore.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the military medical.
Yeah. It's tricky because it's like, you think about it from like a business standpoint. It's like, and especially when there's like an intermediary payer, right? Like that payer really only, they want to pay as little as possible to like get the person to a level that is like acceptable, right? But that's not usually the person's individual goal. And it doesn't like empower like a provider in whatever realm to like seek it just really, the question being asked is like, well, how do we just make this person like good and like kind of okay, when like what the question we should be is like, where does person want to go, right? Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think that's the other hard part about like giant systems is like they just become these like kind of weird, like only efficiency oriented things as opposed to like outcome type things, right? So what are the unique challenges that like guys who want to become a special operator, guys, or you know uh, like women, are women being allowed in like certain special ops stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few who are now allowing women to attempt and go through the process. I know Air Force Special Warfare. I think there's been one or two, and this is, excuse my ignorance, but I think one or two that have been successful throughout one of the pipelines for Special Warfare. But I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is going to be really probably outside of when we talk about just like physical training in general or rehab, I think one of the biggest challenges is so much information out there, right? You look at any blog, you look at Reddit, you look at Instagram, and there's so many different current or former special operators that are telling their stories on how they did something or creating programs that are based off of how they were successful. And it requires a lot of these guys who are, sometimes young, right? 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are preparing to graduate high school or just graduating high school, sift through all this information in a world that they have no idea about to figure out what's going to be the best direction for them, which often leads to, getting a bunch of whole different PDF programs from different people and listening to different advice and kind of running them all at the same time, which is most often leads to pain or injury or just feeling run down and not actually seeing progress with the prep because they're just overloaded with information, overloaded with volume, just overloaded. And then they burn out.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing with like my younger recruits, younger candidates. That's my biggest thing I see with them. And that's where I kind of enter in and try to sift through all the information for them. And so they have something that's really, you take that mental game out. And all I have to do is take that, the preparation, execute on the plan that we establish.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in this, as someone who has like, I mean, I've read a ton of books by Navy SEALs, special operators, and like, and I talked to, and we'll get into this a little bit. Because I started doing CrossFit because it was what I saw like special operators doing. This is 2009, 2000, I think 2009 is when I first went, and I went to I got my level 1 in like 2010, and I met Pat Sherwood, who was like an old school OG CrossFit coach, and he was a Navy SEAL, and he's like, dude, you're way fit enough. Like you're way fit enough. Like it's not gonna be the fitness that sucks. It's gonna be like just the mental grind. Like, can you be in cold ass water? Like, can you just, like go through the evolutions and be okay with the uncertainty? And like, if you can, sorry, my dog's freaking out a little bit. Yeah, and like what the internet has done, the information age has done, is just create this like overwhelm, right? And how do you like tease that out? How do you start? What's the journey of that look like?
I think it's just having a specific plan in the beginning is the one key that really eases some of these guys' mind, is just that like they have someone who is objectively looking at them and prescribing something for them to execute. So all they have to do is work on execute. Because listen, you're right. I don't care how fast you can run, how strong you are, how long you can ruck. If mentally every bit of failure, every roadblock that's coming in your way is leading to you backing out or losing consistency with your training, right? And when I look at your physical training, you just need to get to a certain point, and the rest is a lot of mental resilience, right? Building that mental resilience. And if all you're focused on mentally is how do I design like a certain program, how do I crush my mile and a half when it's not your specific knowledge base, then we don't have the mental capacity to start working on these pieces that are going to build resilience, so that when you're faced with adversity, you can make decisions based on intuition and not emotion. And that's the big thing. We're just in a state where we're just making all these decisions based off emotions because of everything we're reading online. And we're pulling away the intuition out of it. And with intuition, how much do we have if we don't have the knowledge on training? And it's just this like repetitive cycle over and over and over again until you burn out. Right? And then I always tell all people I come into contact with when they're going through this process, like you see the attrition rate across the board in special operations, anywhere between like, 60 to 80%, depending on which one you're looking at, right? Of people that just don't make it, people that fail. You're not seeing the people who burn out and don't even actually get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I was like a guy who didn't get to that point. And I'm kind of okay with my journey now, but the guilt that I carried around from not pursuing it for like 6 or 8 years, probably it was in like honestly guilt and shame. It was like, it was something that when I really like reinvestigated it in like 2020 when I was like, reinvestigating a lot of stuff. And it really was that. Like it was like if I would have had a mentor that was just like, yeah, this is the stuff you need to do. Um and also I really like your distinction between intuition and emotion, because I think intuition is like a trusting, it's like I've done the work so I can trust my gut. And emotion, I just read a great post that's like confessions of like a program hopper, right? And we're gonna get into this with CrossFit because I know you've undertaken CrossFit and I love CrossFit, but like one of the hits of like dopamine from like, and there's some people that tolerate this well and there's some people who don't, but like of it being kind of varied can be really beneficial for some and not beneficial for others, right? But like the post is basically like when you're overwhelmed, there are some people who just they scratch everything and they just burn the boats entirely and they start anew because starting anew gives them that feeling of comfort. And this is like an individual mindset piece, but that I was definitely that way. And I still am to some degree, where it's like if I'm 6 to 8 weeks into running a program and if it's not like blowing me out of the water, I'm like, is this right? Like when a lot of times it's just like make a little tweak. Um, but that's where my intuition has gotten better. It's like, well, actually, like, and objectivity of working with somebody else. Because when you talk to somebody else, and like, yeah, actually, dude, like, look, like, your bench press has gone up. You're even though if it hasn't been 40 pounds, but like, let's be realistic. Like, your squat's going up. You feel good, right? So when it comes to like helping people, how do you like help people convince that they don't need to be like the Goggins mentality or stuff like that. Not that some of that isn't helpful, but like how do you help people tease that out?
Oh man, that's so tough, right? It's so tough because everyone has this perception of what an operator is based off of the most well-known people that are either in movies, writing books, on social media. And you have guys like Goggins. I mean, you have guys like Jocko, you have guys like Nick Lavery, who, are the epitome of, resilience, epitome of what you call discipline, epitome of overcoming large pieces of adversity to get to a certain point where like mentally and physically they're just you know animals, right? They're just phenoms. And I think this is a where this presents itself the most is with my younger guys who never faced adversity. Right? I work with some guys like from inner city or from like childhoods that they brought up in whether it's divorce, death in the family. They were a big support system for their family at a young age, like a bunch of like life stuff that sometimes they're going into the military to escape that world. And like these guys, they overcome so much adversity to build mental resilience. Whereas there's others who, like myself, I mean, I'll just come up and say it. Like I had a pretty sheltered life growing up. I lived in, a comfortable household. Yeah, my parents got divorced, but I basically got what I wanted. Not everything, but you know what I mean? Like I had a comfortable home. I was always fed, never had to worry about any of that. And when we never face adversity, these are the guys who just like come out of high school, go through the process, and just quit early because it's the first time they're actually facing this big piece of adversity. And I think the first thing is just awareness of that because you get a lot of imposter syndrome and you get a lot of comparison when you are aware that you've never faced adversity and you see these other guys who face so much adversity to get to where they are. And you see people saying, oh, yeah, that's what I contribute to having success through a selection pipeline buds. And then you deal with that imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, well, I've never run into that. And I think it's about exposure to others. Like the first thing I do is, hey, I gave my one of my clients, I gave him an assignment. I say, hey, I want you to research on Instagram, just try to find 5 current operators. If they're going to Green Berets, find 5 Green Berets and ask them about their story. And most often you find guys that are similar to you if you look hard enough. And it's about the loud minority that leads to our perceptions on the majority. But when we look hard enough, we can find people who are just like us.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest thing. Like you can educate, guide, and tell people all you want, right? And work on some, affirmations, some vision statements that inspire and lead to that motivation and kind of like we do as business owners, we do the same thing. I can use a lot of the same tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's actually like seeing that there's another reality out there that
Yeah.
will really want to click.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think I read the culture code and he talked like, they investigate like the Navy SEAL culture and like and there I don't remember exactly. Do you remember like what the two things were? It was like one was like, would you physically trust this person to do the job, like their skills as an operator, right? But also like, would you trust them with your wife? I think that was the other thing. Like, and they're really looking for people, honestly, who are more just they're just all about being a teammate, right? And I think that's one of the hard things that like society kind of glorifies like the individual, and it's like really like in these types of scenarios and like yeah, you need like quality people, but you don't have to be the best like physically, you don't have to be the most physically fit person in the world, right? You just, and honestly like you can also like a lot of those aspects. I remember, did you ever read any like thing by Dick Couch? Dick Couch is like,
Mm-mm.
he was a former Navy SEAL. He wrote like multiple books on like buds and stuff. And um he's like really what he saw is like they would get the guy who was like, he was a slow runner, and it was like when they got him and somebody would take him aside and they'd be like, listen, like you're not that slow. Like you're keeping up with people pretty well. Like just like keep pushing and it's gonna be okay. Like, and they would be like this turning point where they would start to actually believe like, okay, I'm worthy of being here. And it was the same. Like it was kind of weird. Like you would give people more, and the people who would like, and I actually just read this in the book I'm reading, the people who would be like, and this is a distinction between what we just talked about because there is like a stress and recovery management type of thing, but it's like if somebody looks at it like, hey, you got your team, like you didn't do so good. You got to do more work. If one person on that team looks at that as like a failure, and another person looks at that as an opportunity to get better, the person who looks at it as an opportunity to get better will get better, and the person who looks at it as a failure will keep failing, right? And that's like the power of just like the mindset and like and it's also how you look at things, right? And who you look up to. Um, so, all right, I do want to ask this. Of like the big guys, like Jocko, Goggins, I know Nick. I don't know how to say his last name. I know you have some personal interaction with him. But like who do you think walks the walk like in a really good way?
Like out of them,
It's just like, yeah, any like kind of special operator or like who do you think is like I would just go to Jocko because I just love Jocko. Like he scares the shit out of me. Um, you know, he's also just doing a lot of cool stuff. But I also think like he's kind of a character. Like, and you have to recognize that, right? Like, and I bet he would tell you that if you were having a blunt conversation. Not that he's being disingenuous. I just think he's just playing up Jocko the operator. Whereas like there's probably moments where he's not like that because the reality of it is like social media drives a lot of these businesses and people have to get attention, right?
so that's the big thing that came to my mind is like I'm gonna say Nick because I have spoken to him one on one like multiple times. Right, I know his values. I know in the capacity that I can, like I know what drives him and how he carries himself outside of when he is this personal figure who wrote a book and does a lot of speaking engagements. Because like I can't sit here and speak about like what Goggins does outside of the camera, right?
Yeah.
Or what Jocko does outside of the camera, outside of what we see, because they're public figures, right? Just like if we look at NFL players, right? I was going to say Aaron Rodgers, but I think he shows a lot of what he does outside of football. But if you look at like a lot of NFL players, like they're public figures when they're in the limelight. Like that's what we know about them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Jalen Hurts
Yeah.
outside of football, right? He's so reserved, and it's just one of those things where it's tough to really name someone within that category because we don't know. I think
Yeah.
that's the most challenging thing. Like, I think a common thing people, who are, we'll call them detractors of like David Goggins is like, oh yeah, he shows us now, but then after he's in the camera, he's probably like, his bones are probably hurting. He's probably in pain all over the place, walking around with a cane. You see that, and it's just speculation because we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think and that's just like it's just the power of it's really easy to criticize. Like it's so easy to criticize, right? It's hard to be constructive. And I just also like I'm really trying to do a better job of like just not I will still criticize people, but like if I've never personally interacted with somebody, like I can't really criticize them. Like, I have a skewed vision of what they are. Like I personally love Aaron Rodgers because the dude can throw a football real damn well, and I'm a Packers fan. Like right, and even when he went to the Jets, like I don't. There's no love lost there. But people will judge him based on decisions he's made, and it's like, well, you don't know anything about that guy. Like you don't know like what his beliefs are, and where he's coming from, and it's just kind of the nature of human beings, right? So I know we've talked about this, and I like it. Like, do you ever have? How have you like managed the I wasn't a special operator, right? I wasn't in that role. Like, and I'll say this just too, like, I'm not the strongest person in the world. And like, I coach powerlifters and weightlifters. And, I do a lot more like general physical fitness and stuff like that because that's kind of like what I really enjoy. But I have there was a stage where I was like, well, I'm not that strong. Like, why would anybody listen to me? But like, how have you learned to navigate that?
Man, it's a really good question because I think it was my biggest challenge in starting a business. Right? We can go down the whole rabbit hole of me mentally, my childhood traumas, all that stuff. But it was like the biggest, challenge for me starting my business because I had imposter syndrome. I had self-doubts. I had all these things that were a barrier to success and really showing up with confidence so that these dudes can trust me. Big dudes can trust me with their career. Right? I think my one of the values I live by, or maybe not value, but like one of my biggest missions in life is to allow people to achieve what their dream career is. Right. So we both work with Honey Badger Project, where we, coach business owners to start and build their businesses. Right? Same thing with my, my client facing business with aspiring special operators. Like, these dudes are preparing for their career, and that fuels me up. And there are a lot of things that, like, we go back to when we first started talking, that can prevent them from being able to be successful in the career. So in order for them to trust me with that career, I need to show up in a way that was going to instill confidence in them, because I know deep down, right, and I always will, that I have the knowledge when it comes to rehab, training, and performance that's going to help guide them to be successful, right? In a selection, in a pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Deep down, I knew that. Surface level, I did not.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really about being confident in myself and bringing out that confidence so that I can show up for them. And I think another part of it was recognizing that there are going to be people out there that are not going to agree with me being able to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that are going to have some form of ego or problem with that. And that's okay. Right? Because in my eyes, we're all fighting the same battle. And if you don't want to do it with me, I'm going to continue doing it. We'll do it alongside each other. We don't have to cross paths. We're going to do, right. We're going to be fighting the same battle. Like, I've had early on, I had a pretty prominent, group of current operators, reach out to me and essentially tell me, like, I better tread water lightly.
Yeah.
And man, that sent me in a mental spiral.
Yeah.
But I was able to work on that confidence and my mindset around that idea of it coming from ego, and accept that. And guess what? If I get on a call with a spine special operator and they want to work with someone who was a former operator and they have some issue with what I'm doing, cool, go find here's someone who I recommend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because we're not going to work together anyway. We're not have a good relationship anyway.
Yeah.
I think
What?
the biggest thing is being confident in myself.
Yeah. Whatever. Did that communication ever resolve with that group, or like did you just kind of let it fester and let it like die, or how did it finalize with anything?
So they ended with um, tread water lightly, and they said something like a soft offer of, if like you want to learn what it's really like message us.
Yeah.
I said, all right, cool. I would love to learn about your experiences. Let's set up a time to hop on a call so I can ask you some questions.
Yeah.
I never responded.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is not a criticism of that. It's just really what it is like people are just afraid that, like, they're afraid of their, I mean, and there is a rich tradition with this stuff, and I'm kudos, like, that's good, right? Um and it's, fear isn't the right way. So I do remember, like, I also will say this, there was like a documentary that was on like Discovery Channel, and it was like the whole process of a class going through buds, right? And they brought in like this guy who was like, for like physical fitness, he was like a rower. He was like a very good rower. I can't remember what his name was, but like the other, it was kind of the Navy's decision and not necessarily some of the instructor's decision. And like, I'm probably butchering the story, but it wasn't so much that they didn't like the guy or didn't think he was capable. It was that he was being inauthentic with what he did know, right? And I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble, is like claiming to be something that we're not. Like, you're not claiming to have been the best Navy SEAL, like a door kicker that was a badass dude who, like did anything, right? You're just claiming that I know how to help people train in a way that can make them more likely to succeed in getting selected. Like, that's a different thing. And you can do what you're talking about very authentically, right? It's when we're like, man, I go to this powerlifting meet, like it's held by the same gym twice a year, and there's this guy, and like he's probably really nice, and I should probably have an actual conversation, but what he's always around like me and my lifters, and he's kind of like the classic, like, well, I'm just a beat up old power lifter, but like, I'm like, well, that you did that to yourself. Like you trained in a way that wasn't sufficient, like sustainable. So like and then you're talking about, how you could still compete if you did X, Y, Z, and it's like, that's great. But like the proof's in the pudding. Like, are you doing the thing, or are you? And that's the hard part about training, and we can get into that a little bit, which it kind of segues nicely to like, what is the overarching like problem that you help people solve in this, like there's a lot to that, but like what is the overarching problem that you help people solve?
So I'm going to say two things. So I think there's like two sides of the same coin when it comes to like physical and when it comes to mental, right? And we're looking at the physical thing. I think like the main core problem I solve is really being able to look at training in a way that allows you to focus on recovery just as much as you focus on your training. Most of the guys that come in are either beat up or in a large plateau or just never seeing progress in their training. Whether they're like a former strength athlete that played football in high school and they're trying to, build their endurance and stack miles and run and ruck, or your classic endurance athlete who needs to build strength. Either or, they have two glaring weaknesses that, like, we go back to misinformation, they're just trying to do too much and they're training 3 to 4 hours a day. And really, it's about taking that and really matching the person to a program with a recovery routine that's going to allow them to see success and progress with their training, whether it's overcoming injury or having the capacity to actually improve your endurance, improve your strength, like without just running on low fumes constantly.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is a lot of guys that work with are younger dudes. And they don't know what it's like to make sacrifices. They don't know what it's like to have discipline. They don't know what discipline really is.
Yeah.
They think of it as the Jocko, the Goggins, but that typically leads to running a shit ton of miles. I hope this is PG-13. Running a boatload of miles.
It's explicit.
And
John Flagg cussed dropped an F bomb like first 3 minutes. So I have it tagged as explicit. So you're all right. You can cuss if you need.
so they run a boatload of miles, or they try to ego lift for 2 weeks and they end up beat up and they don't train for a month.
Yep.
Right? And really kind of reshaping what a disciplined lifestyle, what sacrifice truly means, and what time prioritization truly means, so that they can sustainably get to a high level of capacity, both physically and mentally, without burning themselves out.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think like discipline is not all or nothing. Like discipline is not 100 miles an hour. Discipline is like, hey, did I go to bed early enough? And this is the other hard part about like this, and this is just some practicality of like the military in general, is like stress. And I work with firefighters too, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like stress is kind of stress, and there is an element of like how we look at stress, because people be really good in like go 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 situations, but then they'll be really bad with like the little innocuous things that pop up, right? And that's like kind of that's the stuff that gets them really kind of jacked up. But yeah, it's not all or nothing. And that was my biggest thing. I think, dude, what I think I did, it was like I would I would I was training so hard with this goal in mind that it ultimately just made me feel like, well, I'm never going to be able to like live this lifestyle, right? And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad I did. Just going through like what I'm just going through life and being okay with it. But it's an awesome endeavor that if you want to pursue, it's worth pursuing in a manner that's actually like you can set yourself up to succeed, right? All right, I'm gonna pivot slightly though, because like this is your we can talk about hunting too, but your current passion is CrossFit more and more. Um, then you're a guy who was more powerlifting oriented, right? Prior to this, but like what has invoked this new love of CrossFit, and then how did 24.2 go?
So what invoked the new love of CrossFit? Just doing it. Like I said, I was a power lifter for 4 years. I mean, I've been sticking to three main lifts for a while, but I didn't get serious about powerlifting until about like 3 or 4 years ago when I started working with John Flagg. He was my coach for 3 or 4 years. I forget how long. We worked together for a long time, and I moved back home to where I grew up. And back home, there was like this gym of like a handful of different members of the community came together to build out a gym.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's pretty cool. Like that's pretty cool that you guys are all like together wanting to bring fitness to the community in a different way. And I was like, you know what? One of my values is community. Like I'm a big community driven guy.
Yeah.
And I want to give back to my community in any way I can, right, as I continue to grow. And I want to get more involved in my local community. So I just said, you know what? Hey, John, I was still working with John at the time. Like, hey, John, I'm just going to go to this CrossFit gym a couple days a week. Right. I went there and I just had a blast.
Yeah.
Right. I was always an athlete growing up, football, ran track, and it brought me back to those roots of feeling athletic again. And then I just upped my days, slowly built up 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 6. And I just fell in love with it. It's a different challenge. A lot of times, different challenge every time I go to the gym. It's high intensity, so I think um, my what's the word I'm looking for? My addictive personality that sometimes comes out, I think gets fed by CrossFit. It's just a stimulus that I just love to do. Like just wake up and do it with my community. And that's what really made me fall in love with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I I mean, I so like CrossFit is really cool, right? And it's become kind of like when I was doing it in like 2000, when I discovered it in 2009, I was a skinny kid that was running a lot of miles, and it kind of gave me this gateway. Well, like, oh, like you should also be lifting weights, and you can also be doing like pull-ups and stuff. And, um, there is, and also just like the old school CrossFit website was like some of the workouts were like practice handstands for 30 minutes, right? It has become a little bit more of a different animal, which I think is like when Greg Glassman was programming for it, it was a little bit more of a like, this is general physical preparation. Like, there's going to be this cadence that's a little bit more rest oriented. And like programming for CrossFit has become kind of an art in itself, right? Um, the thing that like I got my level 1 and I went and then I thought Olympic weightlifting was the bomb, and I really do enjoy Olympic weightlifting. It's like the golf of fitness. It's just super hard, super technical. It's got to be strong. But like the thing that was powerful about CrossFit was like there were other people kind of doing this goofy stuff with me. There was also some detractors from that because back in the day, like man, when I was first getting into it, like people were like shaving reps and there was like drama in that regard. And it's like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, why does this matter? Like, I worked out with this guy who he was just finishing these wads so fast, and like so the owner started to like actually like count his reps. He's like, you like shave like 50% of your reps, and he's like, and he kind of had to fess up to it. He left. It was a bummer, right? But the community aspect of it, and then just also just doing something hard. Like when you show up and you do your wad, or you look forward to it. If you do it in the morning, like the rest of your day, it's gonna be pretty chill, right? And you already did that, and that's kind of working out in general, right? But if it's the thing, a lot of people look like the cumulative and positive effect of CrossFit, um, is super beneficial. But I will ask you, what are your critiques?
The critiques of CrossFit.
Yeah, or what do people get wrong, or what do we like? What's hard about it?
So I think the big thing, like every critique I'm gonna have about CrossFit, isn't about there's gonna be one about the CrossFit methodology itself. But the CrossFit methodology as it stands, I think is a very good methodology when it comes to overall health and wellness. If you follow the methodology,
Hmm.
right? I was laughing when I said 5 to 6 days a week, right? Because like that's not following CrossFit methodology,
Yeah.
right? CrossFit methodology is 3 days on, 1 day off is the typical thing. Because like I said, Glassman found that on that fourth day, like his performance would decrease significantly.
Hmm.
Right. And the methodology states you should probably be following the 3 day on, 1 day off flow. But who does that? Not many people. Right. I mean, I scale my volumes, I'm aware, but where the critique for me comes in CrossFit is within each gym. If coaches aren't following the methodology or they're not actually coaching, that's what leads to people getting hurt,
Hmm.
right? Because they have no business doing the overhead squat because they could barely do a goblet squat, right? And really sticking to the methodology, how it's written, and actually going in there and coaching and not just being a babysitter. I
Yeah.
think is the biggest thing. It's not the methodology itself, it's the coaching within each gym, which is variable,
Yeah.
right? It's so variable across the gyms. I think CrossFit itself, whether it's a money grab recently, which it probably is with the private equity firm that now owns it, increasing dues, right? Increasing their your affiliate fees. I think part of it, what that's going to do is weed out some of these gyms that really aren't operating in a way that is getting the targeted results and targeted goals of the CrossFit methodology.
Yeah. I think the thing that I always remember is when I was following things more closely is like, the reason that it was like an affiliate instead of a franchise was because like, well, what Greg Glassman believed in, or what the initial thing, and it's one of the values, or it's virtuosity, right? So like we don't, and he's also like generally a libertarian type of guy, and it's like, well, the market will tell people if they're being successful, right? The tricky thing about the fitness space is the market, what the market wants, and this is not bad, the market doesn't really know what they want, and this is where marketers and advertisings can be so big. And because what a lot of people want is they just want to sweat and they just want to feel good about themselves for showing up, and there's nothing wrong with that. Does it get people where they want to go? Not all the time. But there's also just there's nothing wrong with exercise and activity, but there's also things that people do, like, there's there we me and Mary were in Memphis and we walked by this, like, it was called like Sweat 360, or it's like, and it was like, it's just one of those classes, like, yeah, you're just coming in here to just, move a bunch, and like, is it advantageous? And me and Mary have both taught my wife Mary have both talked to people. It's like, yeah, I did like 150 squats every day for like, 6 weeks, and it was great. And then like, but like now, yeah, my knees are just terrible. Like, well, yeah, like, because we just overdosed the crap out of you in this 6 week period, right? And that's, unfortunately, it kind of ties both into special ops training and just general fitness, general health, is like, people, it is all or nothing. It's not this progression, right? Um, when it comes to like, all right, because yeah, you're like managing your volume, and I think you understand, like, you can go hit 6 weeks, 6 sessions a week, and but you also get addicted to moving, because I know you've talked about this. Like, you got to go do something. But um, what would your 3 tips for like beginner Justin, if Justin didn't know what he knows now, what would you tell him to do when it comes to like managing workload, training, etc.?
Woo! I think the first tip is leave your ego at the door when you step in the gym. I still fall in the trap, right? Like I'm at the point where, I'm following, RX programming, And we follow Mayhem's programming, Mayhem affiliate,
Mm-hmm.
which is um, Rich Froning's company, right? And there's the RX, and then above that in the coaching notes, there's affiliate compete, right? So it's more competitive level. And of course, my ego sees that. I'm like, oh, I need to do that, right? And oftentimes I just don't have the capacity, not always, but depending on what the movements are, I don't have the capacity to actually get the desired stimulus from that workout with doing compete. And I make the mistake, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say, hey, I never make decisions in my training based off ego, because I do it. We all do it.
Yeah.
Um, it's about learning from that and saying, all right, cool, I can reflect back and be like, all right, that was a poor decision. Right? And moving forward and learning from. So I think it's like leaving the ego at the door. The next thing is, don't expect to perform. This is I'm going through it now. All right. Don't expect to perform up to your own expectations when life around you is absolutely chaotic,
Yeah.
right? Because your overall stress is going to impact your ability to perform.
Yeah.
We've had in our personal life, we've had something pop up that was very like emotionally draining for me and Sarah. I've been battling a cold, and we got a puppy 2 weeks ago, which is limiting my ability to sleep.
Yeah.
So, all those things going back to my performance on 24.2 and 24.1, um, it's just not up to where I want it to be. But when I step back and be like, all right, cool, the context of my life really dictated my performance, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of it too is like just like my favorite like training quote of all time is like Mike Teixeira saying like, just take what's there. Because like what's good is often like if you don't show up, it's okay. Like if you take a rest day, it's okay. But like when you're gonna show up, just do what you can do. And like this is kind of the nature of like inside the workout, like how you start, you might not be feeling it, and then like you get going into a workout. I remember like feeling like absolute garbage. I think it was the one where it was like dumbbell snatches and like box jump overs. I can't remember when that was, like 2017 or something, like 17.1. And like, I just remember starting that workout feeling awful. And then I like got a little bit ways in. And I'm like, you know what? I'm starting to feel good. Like, all right, let's try to like push a little bit harder. And yeah, that's kind of the hard part about CrossFit. But it's all the hard part about training in general is like you're just trying to learn like your limitations, but also like push into them a little bit. And it's like that's the cool part about this is like you don't really know where you can go, but you got to like meet yourself where you're at over and over again. And that's like a high level skill, right? And like business is like the same, right? Because you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the thing that everybody else makes it, makes, right? But you got to keep being curious about your situation. And um yeah, like I think the cool thing about how much do you have people at the gym that like are your buddies now?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say like the people I talk to the most are the people in my gym now, and ranging from like all ages, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the youngest people in my gym.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like ranging all ages of people who like I consider friends now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the cool things. It's like that's kind of been I went to PT school with the intention of opening a gym. And that's like, and this, I've said this numerous times. It's like that's been the hardest part is because I do believe in I like the community aspect of it, right? And there's also a gym around me that's doing it really well, and like that's kind of also just a detractor. It's like, well, do we need another space? And it's like, do I want to compete? And I also kind of don't think it's a competition. I really don't think it would be that way. It's just kind of where me and my wife are at this stage of life and what we got going on. But like the power of having a couple buddies who are a good form of peer pressure is really positive, right? Um, and I think me and you also like we just see the pitfalls that people get into, and we can regulate ourselves a little bit better. That's the hard part for a lot of people is they get into that competition mindset all the time, and they don't necessarily work their weaknesses the way they should, or they don't lean into like just take a rest day, go for a bike ride, chill out. Um, And that, the human mind is really interesting because we all think we're so different, but we're actually like pretty similar, right? You got to learn to see it. So, all right, last two questions, lightning round. What is your favorite CrossFit workout?
Oh, favorite CrossFit workout. Does deadlift strength work count?
Not really, but because that's just literally just deadlifting, but we can count it. We'll count that. So this is my thing too. It's like on some level, like CrossFit is just general physical preparedness, which general physical preparedness, unless you're an Olympic weightlifter, unless you're um a power lifter, unless you're a sprinter, like most training really is just kind of GPP work, but maybe we're going to be a little bit more targeted towards your specific goals, right? That's the thing I always go down with because like I appreciating the psychographic needs of certain populations, but at the end of the day, like good training is good training. Um, okay, what's the one movement? This is not the other question. What do you hate the most? What movements do you hate the most?
Oh, snatch. Despise it because I suck at it.
Yeah, it's
I
hard.
just, it's one of those things. I'm strong, but like technique, mobility, just being comfortable in those positions. Because I mean, when you low bar back squat for as many years as I low bar back squatted,
Yeah,
overhead squat is freaking tough.
yeah, yeah,
Because it's basically like when I first started overhead squatting and snatching, like I essentially like the bar was so far behind my head, it was basically in a low bar position
yeah,
overhead.
yeah.
And I'm just like, it's such a tough thing for me to learn right now.
Yeah, I think I powerlifting got made me really stiff. I was already a stiff guy, but it made me really stiff. And I was doing a lot of Olympic lifting before what I'm currently doing, and I kind of just decided like I'm gonna train Olympic lifting because I want to maintain mobility. And like if you can Olympic lift, you can power lift, but not necessarily the other way. Like you can, but you got to kind of keep your kind of training complementary. But man, snatching is so a lot of light work, a lot of barbell work, a lot of technical stuff. That's why it's hard, is because even if you're strong, it's very humbling to hit those positions. And like a lot of people can kind of get away with it on the clean, and there's a lot, but Olympic lifts, they're wild. All right, last question. Uh, when it comes to what's your biggest buck, and do you have a trophy buck out there that you want to get in the not too distant future that like you scout an area for when it comes to hunting?
Oh my goodness. So my biggest buck was actually this past season, during archery season. It was my first archery deer, biggest buck. It was a nice 10 pointer. Um, dude was the biggest deer that I've run into like in person outside of my cameras. Right. Like and this was honestly, it was so cool. It was literally just 50 yards behind my house. I went out one Friday, sat there, and just sometimes it's just luck. Didn't scout at all. I just went back there, found a good tree, climbed up on it, and he presented himself right in front of me. So I got that this past year. Should be picking up my European mount at least soon. So you'll see a picture of that. And so I'm going to answer this in two ways because I can't answer it in one way.
Yeah.
The trophy buck that like I want that I've scouted,
Hmm.
like the mountains that I hunt around here. Who knows what he's gonna look like this year? But dude, he was like this big, like I didn't like count him out, like score him out, but he's like this big 12 pointer with thick freaking main beams that just look like an animal. His neck huge, like had to be 5.5 year old buck, maybe 6.5.
Hmm.
He's just a cool boy. And probably will never see him. Probably will not see him. So I don't have enough cameras out there to really track like exactly where he goes, right, when season hits, because he always seems to disappear when the season hits. So getting in would be nice, but man, I want to do my dream hunt right now is to go out west somewhere and do a backpacking elk trip. Stay out there for 3 days, hike 10 miles out, and just whether it's with a rifle or a bow, I don't care. I just want to do a backpacking elk trip.
What I would all right, so like this is one of the things when it comes to hunting. Like what is it about hunting that you like value and is just like why is it a part of your life?
So why it's part of my life is because it's just a culture of where I live in. Why I got into hunting is because everyone here hunts,
Yeah.
and it's like everyone does it. Like the first day of rifle season, we literally have off school.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, that's literally how big it is. Like, because people would skip anyway, so they said, "All right, let's just make it a day off for everyone every single year."
Yeah.
It's a point where like I played basketball like in junior high, and I skipped basketball practice for a few days to go hunting, and I lost my starting position for a couple games for that, just because how important it is to me, right? Because everyone does it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it has come to be like something that I do that allows me to disconnect from the rest of the world. And it does, and people who are probably hunting detractors probably think about that, and they're like, "Oh, well, can you just sit out in nature?" Sure, I can. I do that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling you get when you harvest a beautiful animal like a deer,
Mm-hmm.
like it's something I can't really describe.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like a feeling that it's it's undescribable to me. Like it's just like this sense of connection to wild. And yeah, it's hard to even describe. And and yes, for everyone listening who may be against hunting, I fill up my freezer,
Yeah.
and my goal every year I go out when I go hunting is to, whether it's between deer season or turkey season, to harvest enough meat so that I don't have to buy meat from the grocery store in a full year every year,
Yeah.
because it's sustainable.
Yeah. No, I think like, the other thing I think about it when it comes to hunting, like deer, elk, like there's a lot, and I get people, we can get into the ethics of all sorts of things, right? But like that animal isn't gonna have a nice end, right? Like in the wild, stuff goes pretty gnarly for animals. Like, and so you hunting it, utilizing as much of the meat as possible. Like honestly, kind of celebrating it. I know people are like, "Oh, how is it celebrating it?" It's like I don't know, but I have with you. I have someone who has hunted and will hunt again in the future. It's pretty dope, and you want that experience, and like it's an emotional experience, like it's so kudos to you. And I think like yeah, getting it's also, dude, I think it's human, like to hunt is to be a human in some capacity, right? So yeah, there's a lot to it. Dude, this has been great. I don't want to take up too much more of your afternoon. Hey, the Wi-Fi held up, or the hotspot held up, which is good. So
Yep.
dude, appreciate it. This
In
has
a
been
dark
fun.
room.
Yeah.
Sit in the dark room. Luckily, I have my laptop screen is bright enough so you can see me.
You did
Um,
good.
the
It looks
dark
good.
room.
All right. So pitch yourself. How do we find you? What do you do? How do you help people? Let me know. What do you got?
Of course, so you can find me on Instagram. It's Justin.Sof Elite Initiative, SOF Elite Initiative. Um, and yeah, I mean that's where, if you are aspiring special operator, if you're listening to this and somehow you come across this, and you want to kind of chat and see if I can help you, you can find me there. If you're someone who listens to this and you're a clinician or a coach and you're like, oh shoot, that's something I think I would love to do, feel free to reach out there, and we can workshop it, because Lord knows a lot of guys and girls who probably need that support. So feel
100%.
free. Any questions, reach out there.
All right, dude. Love it. Peace. Have a good one. See you, buddy.
You too.